Hey, beautiful soul. Welcome to Spirit Speakeasy. I'm Giovanni, joyful medium. I'm a working psychic medium, energy healer, and spiritual gifts mentor. This podcast is like a seat at the table in a secret club, but with mediums, mystics, and the spiritual luminaries of our time. So come behind the velvet ropes with me and see inside my world as I chat insider style with profoundly gifted souls. We go deep, share juicy stories, laugh a lot, and it wouldn't be a speakeasy without great insider secrets and tips. You might even learn that you have some gifts of your own. So step inside the Spirit Speakeasy. Hey, beautiful soul. Welcome back for another episode of Spirit Speakeasy. Today, we are just going to have a solo chat, you and I, about a really interesting topic that has kind of fascinated me for years. Who do we meet in heaven? Now, maybe you have wondered this about yourself. Maybe you've thought about who might we meet when we're on the other side, who might greet us. Maybe you've even wondered this about a loved one of your own that has already crossed over to the other side, to the spirit world. It is one of the most common questions my clients hope to get answered in a reading session, whether it's a group reading or one-on-one private reading. Most people want to know who is there to greet their loved ones when they make their transition. Who are they with now? Or who have they met? Some version of that. Now, I will tell you, if you don't like the word heaven, I know I've titled this episode, Who Do We Meet in Heaven? It's okay to swap in another word there. The reason I chose that word is because it seems like that's how people are searching for this topic. And I want people who want to hear about this to be able to find it. But you can think of it as who do we meet on the other side? Who do we meet when we transition? And once we're on the other side, who's with us? Who do we spend time with? Who's around us? So we are going to dive into that topic. Now, in previous topics, I sometimes have gotten the question, well, how do you know? Joy, how do you know? Are you just speculating? Are you just making this up? And the truth is, we all will know one day for ourselves when we cross over, hopefully many, many, many moons from now. But a lot of the information that I have, I understand in several ways. So much of it comes through my own personal experience as a medium, communicating with the spirit world, communicating with loved ones of my clients on this side that have already crossed over. And much of it is mixed in with the entire communication, with the entire session. I don't always love the word message because I feel like it makes people a little confused about what sort of information comes forward. Sometimes they do have guidance or advice or thoughts, but most often it's really just them wanting to let you know that they're at peace, they're safe, their life continues on just in a different way. They still are with you. They're still around you. I know we've talked about this in previous episodes, but they're illustrating so much more when they communicate. They're often sharing who's with them right in that moment. Sometimes they'll share who helped them cross over, who was there when they were passing away, for example. And I am going to share some client stories today just because for me, I feel like stories are a great way to illustrate, and I like to learn through stories as well. So I've got some stories for you. So that's one way that I come to some of this information is through what's shared with me by people's loved ones on the other side. Another way is I do ask my own guides some of these questions. I have guides that I work with as a medium, and sometimes I will just kind of float the question out there. Sometimes I'll receive the answer in meditation. Sometimes I'll have a spiritual experience of my own, and the answer will become clear. Another thing to remember is that I worked as a developing medium, meaning training with a mentor in practice sessions, in classes, in different settings for many years before I even kind of hung my professional shingle, so to speak. So I have wealth of knowledge also from my own mentors, from experiences in class settings with other mediums, from things that we all seem to find common in our own readings. There are common threads and common occurrences, themes, things that we as mediums collectively experience. So it's not that I'm making these things up. I'm getting them from somewhere, and that's largely where I'm getting them from. Is those three places. Have you ever wondered who's with your loved ones on the other side? For me, I feel like it's kind of a natural feeling to understand that they're all together. Now, I know we've talked about the spirit world as being not a faraway place, as being sometimes the way we refer to it in the work is a world within our world. It's just an unseen world. Just like there are Wi Fi waves all around us, and light waves and sound waves that we don't see with our physical senses, our eyes, right? Uh, it doesn't mean they're not there. Similarly, the spirit world is a world within our world. So they are close to us. They can be with us in a moment's notice or just a heartbeat away, is how we sometimes say it. And through these few examples I'm going to give today, I hope that you will start to open your mind to and think about who your loved ones might be with, or who might greet you, or who you might get to meet. So I'm going to give a few client stories just to illustrate some of this. But I do want to touch into quickly before I do that some of the, I don't know, people and non-people figures that we meet on the other side. So we certainly do meet our pets. And this can be pets that are from childhood that you maybe have even forgotten about. It can be beloved animals that you had with you, in the later parts of your life. It can even be animals that we don't necessarily always think of under that heading of pet. So perhaps you had horses or bovine, like cows on a farm, and you had a friendship with a cow. I've heard it to happen. You will meet those animals, and I believe even more animals, souls of animals on the other side. So people often want to know, do I get to see my pets again? Who has my pet? And that is something that can be communicated by loved ones in readings. I just did a group reading this past weekend, and one of the stars of the show was this beloved family. I mean, not even a pet, a family member who just happened to be in the body of a dog during its life here, and was such a good communicator, and shared, how she is still with the family, and some of her favorite memories, and some of her favorite things, and some of the ways that she's still saying hello, and specific examples of how people in the community still talk about her and remember her. And so it's really lovely when animals communicate, but certainly you do get to see them when you cross over. And it's not uncommon. It's not in the stories that I'm going to give today, but it's not uncommon for, like, if you really loved an animal that's crossed over, it's not uncommon for, in a reading, one of your people, like say it's your parent or your grandparent, to let us know in that reading, oh, and by the way, we've got the dogs here. Or, we're loving the cats and they're with us and we're taking care of them. So that kind of brings me to my next point. I am going to give a bit of a story about this, but our families all together, and that can mean family that is direct bloodline in this lifetime. It can mean family that passed away before you were born. Chances are you would have spent time with them as a soul on the other side before you even came in to your lifetime this time. Even if it was someone you just crossed with, often people tell me they just crossed with their grandparent, meaning grandma was just passing away, the same month that they were born, or grandpa just was passing away, a week before they were born, for example. That happens pretty commonly. So you will get to spend time with those people that you maybe didn't get a chance to meet in this life. And also ancestors. Now, I know we've talked about ancestors quite a bit here before. So I just want to give you a quick reminder. I won't go all the way into it, but ancestors can be someone that was in your familial bloodline in this lifetime. So like your great, 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 great grandparents of this family that you currently have been born into in this lifetime. It can look like people that are of a bloodline from a different lifetime. I believe in past lives and future lives, and Uh, and we could talk more about that if you're interested in another episode. I'm not going to go too far into that right now. But for those of you that also believe in past lives, maybe you had a different family in a past life, and it would be all of those generations of people that you'll get to meet. But remember, ancestors are not just blood family, could be adopted family, could be family of choice and their loved ones. So maybe you have a best friend in this life. Their ancestors, their family will also be with you. You'll get to meet them as well. And ancestors, like I said, don't just go to our family. It can be maybe you're a nurse. Can be a lineage of nurses. Maybe it's back to the first original nurses of healthcare. If you're an engineer, you will get to meet engineering ancestors, people who forged paths before you. If you are in the music industry, maybe there are ancestral musicians who came before you in the styles that bred together to create the style of music that you are involved in. You will get to meet those ancestors. So ancestors of all kinds. Hopefully this is opening your mind as we go here. And along those lines, this is one I can't prove, but I do deeply, deeply believe. I believe we get to meet people who we just admired or who we wanted to meet, not in a celebrity sighting, frivolous, ego fluffing kind of a way. But if someone produced a work of art, for example, a painting or a book that really moved you and meant something to you in this lifetime, I can't understand why we wouldn't have the opportunity to meet them. So I believe that we get to meet those souls as well and spend time in that way as well. And that kind of brings me to the next human and non-human area I want to touch into, the guides and inspirers. Now, we all have our own team of guides. I know we've talked about that before, guides and inspirers who help us in this lifetime. I believe we get to meet them and spend time with them. So the guides who are guiding you in this lifetime behind the scenes, whether you're someone that feels like you have an understanding of your spirit guides or you don't, you'll still get to meet them. You'll get to really understand the way my guides have shown it to me in the past, very early in my development. They showed it to me like a tapestry. Now, if you don't know what a tapestry is, they used to hang them in castles in medieval time. It's essentially a painting that's made out of woven thread, so like a giant needlepoint, for example. And one side has a beautiful picture, and they've explained it to me that from this side, from this world, from Earth, in our 3D human perspective, that we only see the back of the tapestry. So that's like the inside of the sweater, basically, the messy part with all the knots and the threads and it doesn't make sense and we can't quite see the picture, and we might be aware of some of the colors and some of it, but we really can't see clearly that vibrant, crisp, beautiful, tight scene or picture. And when we cross over, that's when we really get this broad, full understanding of everything that was going on in our life, how things connect, how we were guided in times when we felt like we weren't, where our spirit guides were interjecting or helping or nudging. We get to see all of that. So, of course, you're going to spend time with your guides and inspirers to do that. And I also understand that time is different on the other side. I just recently, I can't remember what podcast or interview this was on, but I just recently was listening to a podcast with someone that had had a near-death experience, and she was articulating it that she had this near-death experience. She had collapsed, and people were running inside the building that she was outside of to get help. She went over to the spirit world. She had this whole experience, and she said she remembered her guides telling her that it had been 2 weeks' time in like spirit world time, which isn't exactly a thing. And like, I'm always complaining that the language isn't quite right, but we try our best. So in spirit world time, her guides and angels had been telling her, okay, this is 2 weeks spirit world time. She understood it to be 2 weeks time there. But when she came back into her body here and kind of like back to life or whatever, back from her near-death experience, it had been less than a day. So she had had this amazing full tour and full immersion experience and got to be with her guides and got to understand lots of things about her life and her own past and her like mission, so to speak. And it had been just a quick bit of time here on our side that added up to much, much more time on the other side. So the reason I'm telling you that is because I think it's important to understand that it's not like we have this limited little window of time over there. We have plenty of time to see and meet and greet and experience and be with anyone we want. I also believe that we get to meet and be with our angels. This is more of a personal belief. If angels don't resonate with you, that's okay. That word I know is associated with religious beliefs for some people. For me, when I say angel, essentially I mean a very high vibrational being of light that are on the other side supporting us, encouraging us, loving us, who fall under that category of angels. For me, you can call them something different if you like. I believe we all have the archangels that are available to us that we talk about here and several of us work with, and then we also each have two personal guardian angels that spend their life with us, that our lives with us, I guess I should say. Their lives are infinite, so they spend our lives with us, from the other side, just encouraging us, loving us, supporting us, nudging us as necessary. If you've ever heard the stories from people who got almost died in a car accident, and there was an angel that somehow moved them and laid them gently on the pavement when surely crashing through that windshield should have taken their life. Angels will intervene in our lives here on very rare occasions, but I do believe we get to meet them and spend time with them on the other side. So those are some of the other beings that we spend time with, and other opportunities for us there. I'm going to touch into the life review quickly just because I think it's important as we understand this. And then I'm going to go into these few client stories to better illustrate like who are the people that we spend time with. We know pets and angels and guides and inspirers and ancestors. Okay, we've moved through that now, but who are the people? Because that's, I think, what most of us want to know about our own loved ones, and even maybe for ourselves. Like, hey, when I go over there, who's going to help me cross over? Who am I going to hang out with? So the life review, as I understand it, again, through my experience with the spirit world, through my own guides, through my own mentors, and through the experience and understanding of other mediums that seem to be all in alignment with this, I understand the life review to be, the way I always explain it, is not some staunchy, buttoned up man at a gate with a list of all the things you did who's going to decide if you get to transition or you don't, but instead it's an experience. I understand it as our guides and or angels help us move through this mystical spiritual experience where we get to, it's not quite look over like a movie. It's not quite relive it the way we're living it now. It's almost sort of like, if you remember that Ebenezer Scrooge movie, where Christmas Carol, is that what it is? Where the ghost of Christmas past comes and he goes and he stands in the scene and he feels the emotions and he sees the other person's perspective and he feels the other person's emotions, and he feels how sad it is for, is it Jim Cratchit? What's his employee that he's like not taken care of? So sort of like that, but we do it for our whole entire life. Anyone we've ever crossed paths with, any emotion we've ever created in another human being, whether it's an exchange with a person at a counter in a convenience store, or whether it's our most pivotal and important relationships in this lifetime, we feel any emotion, any and every emotion that we've ever created in another person, good, bad, or otherwise, and get to experience that ourselves and get to see what happened that we didn't know about, maybe what happened to that person that made them be so angry, maybe what we did and the ripple of that and how it really affected that person, maybe the truth of how someone else felt when we didn't know or weren't willing to see. So all of that and so much more is part of our life review. Now, I believe that since time is different, I can't give you like it takes 2 weeks. I don't think it works like that, but I can tell you that I've had people come into my office to hear from a loved one, and the loved one that's communicating as we work, I become aware, oh, I don't feel like this person's been on the other side very long. Is this less than a year? My client will say yes. I'll say, is this less than 6 months? They'll say yes. And then I'll become aware, oh, this is this week that this happened. This person crossed over this week. And, in that instance that I'm talking about right now, my client said yes, but their loved one was still communicating. So for me, just in my own experience and with what's been shared from mentors and other colleagues, I don't believe that this life review keeps them from being able to be near us or being able to communicate. I think our souls are more expansive and more multifaceted than our human mind can currently understand. So for whatever reason, they can be doing more than one thing at once. The soul can be experiencing more than one thing at once. And this brings me to wanting to share these stories with you from some recent readings that really illustrate my points here that I've made so far, and what we're going to talk about who does help us transition to the spirit world, who is with us when we're there. I recently had a reading, and it was the client in the office was a lovely lady who had lost her husband. I didn't know she had lost her husband when she came in, but as I moved my awareness to the spirit world, I was aware of this gentleman in spirit, and he, shared details about their life, about the way they were together, about their relationship, about his passing in this case. And she was affirming it all and letting me know, yes, that's all correct. He was sharing a lot of the emotions of how much, I want to say this right. I'm not going to say it exactly right, but like how much he knew that she still needed him, that she wasn't ready to let him go at the time of his passing. And was also articulating that he knew and could feel that she was worried about him. And as he's continuing to communicate, he made me aware that her dad was there with him. And I asked her, was your dad friends with your partner in life? And she said, no, but they would have been really good friends. My dad passed away when I was young. I said, well, your husband's showing me that your dad is there with him and that they're very good friends now, and they joke and pal around, and there's a beautiful relationship between the two of them. And she was like, well, how can that be? Because that's my dad's and my family, and my husband has his own family. So this is one of those ways that the spirit world, through just what they're sharing, hey, your dad's here, basically is what he was saying. He loves you, he misses you. Oh, she hasn't seen her dad in so long. Essentially is the vibe of the conversation from this gentleman in the spirit world. And through that, not only was he illustrating, that he knew her feelings and he knew she was worried, that he wanted to set her mind and heart at ease, but because he's mentioning her dad, her beloved grandma, who he did know briefly, he's illustrating that the families are together. So his side of the family, who he did say some hellos to, his mom was still in the world, and he was grateful to his wife in this reading for checking in on his mom, looking after her, so to speak, really deepening that friendship since his passing, because he was aware that his mom was also struggling, but was saying, oh, my grandma's here, and my aunt, and my brother, and also your dad, and your grandma's here, and I really love your dad. And so, and I know I'm saying it like he's verbally talking to me. They don't stand next to me in a reading and talk in my ear from the spirit world. I often wish they did, but it doesn't work that way. It's through the emotion, and it's through me just knowing and understanding in the work of mediumship what he's wanting to communicate. And my client's able to validate, yeah, all those people are on the other side. So he's proving, if you will, or giving the evidential detail to highlight that the sides are together. So even if your families didn't know each other on this side, or didn't get along, or lived in totally different countries and never met, they still will, through the love for you, through the connection to you, they still will be together. They still will get to spend time together. So she had always wished that her dad could have gotten to meet her husband. And in fact, when her husband crossed over, they did get to meet, were great friends, and did have a lot in common. It came through the communication that the husband and the dad actually had kind of a similar sense of humor, and a quirky, like, jokester sense of humor, the two of them, very boyish and playful, each of them. And then her dad did communicate a bit as well. And her grandma, who helped raise her, that was so important and special in her life, did get to meet the husband briefly, for for a handful of years before her passing. But this woman, my client, just really loved her grandma, and so she was so relieved, to know that the grandmas on both sides were looking after her husband, so to speak, were spending time with him, were there loving him. So just through what he gave in that reading, like I said, he was giving so much to validate their life together, that he had all his memories, that he knew who he was, that he remembered all the finer points of their love, that he was still spending time with her, that he knew what was going on with his mom, that he knew her heart and her emotions, that she was worried about him, and was sharing who he was with, illustrating not only that they get to know each other, but they do all get to be together. So it's not uncommon for spirit people to show that or to explain that to me. And the beautiful thing is, he knew she needed to hear that. It's not. I say this often, and hopefully you've heard me say it before. In a reading, in a spirit communication, we don't always hear about every single thing that's on our list that we like want to hear. But the intention is to address the need of your soul. So in this case, my sitter was just so stricken with worry, afraid that her husband was alone on the other side. She needed to hear that her dad was with him, and her grandma and his grandma. And so it was so healing and relieving to her to know that that he was safe and at peace and with all of the family. And she was even more touched and surprised to know that the family itself, both sides, so to speak, were all together, even though they didn't all know each other in this life on this side. So that's the first story. The second story I want to share is of a client who was a parent that came into my office. I didn't know when someone comes in, I rarely ever know who it is they're hoping to hear from. I usually just kind of give them my little speech about how it works and what can happen and what I need from them and what to expect from me. And it's maybe like a 3 or 4 minute, here's what to expect, here's how this works, kind of a little talk. And then I just move my awareness and I either move into their space and do psychic reading, or I'm aware of someone in the spirit world and I work with whoever I become aware of. And then as I start to move my awareness and work with that spirit person, I start to understand who they are and what they want to communicate. So as I moved my awareness to the spirit world, I was aware of this young man. He was very strong and strapping and clearly on the young side of his life when he passed away. And he was sharing with me that as part of his passing, and I always tell people, some spirit people want to talk about their passing and some don't. I am not pushing them to talk about a certain subject. They know what they need to share. They know what your soul needs to hear, and they will share it through whatever they choose to share. But he did need to talk about his passing. So, of course, I honor that and work with whatever they're communicating. And I was aware of being inside of an ambulance with him. And I was aware of an accident around his passing that was a very difficult car accident. And all of a sudden, as I'm communicating with this young man, I became aware of this client's mom in the spirit world as well. And I said, wait a minute, your mom's in the spirit world as well. And she said, yeah, she is. And I said, okay, she's communicating, and she, identified herself and talked a little bit about herself as well. And then I said, your mom wants you to know that she was in the ambulance with your son while he was transitioning, because through the communication, he let me know that he actually made his transition to the spirit world while in that ambulance. He didn't make it to the hospital in his physical body. He did share information about how hard the EMTs were working on him, and how much they really wanted to fix everything for him. But he was saying, don't worry, my grandma was with me in the ambulance, and grandma on the other side also communicated this, who was my client's mom. Um, and my client just burst into tears, and they were like, oh my gosh, I'm so relieved to know that. I was so worried, because I think the way it was communicated from this young man on the other side was that, my parent was really scared because they thought I was all alone. They couldn't make it in time. They didn't make it to the scene of the accident. had already been in the ambulance. And, by the time the parents were waiting at the hospital, he was already transitioned when the ambulance arrived at the hospital. So he was saying, my parents have been so heartbroken thinking I was alone in that ambulance, which is why he was sharing about the EMTs and how hard they were working and how compassionate they were with him and how kind they were and how hard they were working at their jobs. Then also he was saying, but yeah, but my grandma was there too. So I wasn't alone. She was there and she was helping me transition. And it was so relieving to these grown-ups who were in this young man's life because they were terrified. And I had no way of knowing that this was the story of this young man's passing, but through his communication, he knew that that really was burdening his parents. This feeling of not being able to make it in time, of being worried, so worried that he passed away and made his transition scared and alone. And he was sharing, no, my grandma was there. So the reason I chose this story to share was because it is very common. It's not in there's no two readings that are alike because no two stories are exactly alike of our human experience, but it's not uncommon for a person who's transitioning, whether in an ambulance or in a hospital or even at home or wherever they might make their transition, to share, oh yeah, this other family member who's already in the spirit world was actually there with me. And I started to become aware of them sitting next to me, in this case, in this ambulance. And I was so happy to see her and I wasn't worried at all. And then all of a sudden, I left my body. But I got to go be with my grandma and give her hugs. And she helped me transition to the other side. And there was everybody. And sometimes they'll even articulate, it's a big party over here, if that's their personality. So just know that there are other loved ones from the spirit world who help people transition over as they're making that transition. So it's easier for them. So it's easier for the human part of them and for their soul to understand what's happening, to make that transition in a peaceful, comfortable, loving way. Now, I'm sure it's not everyone's grandma who shows up. I'm sure for different people, it is a different loved one, but there are loved ones in each person's family, and my understanding that do come and help and greet them and help them with that transition. Um, it's actually going to lead right into the next story I'm going to tell, but how amazing was it? It was just such an incredible part of that reading that both mom in the spirit world and son, grandma and grandson, were able to communicate, oh yeah, no, grandma came in and helped and was there. And actually my client was saying, yeah, I really had hoped my mom would be there with him and that they would be together. And this grandma just adored her grandson. But even if they didn't, even if it was a grandma who didn't love her grandson in this on this side, or didn't know her grandson, or he was a baby when she crossed and didn't get to spend time with him, none of that changes the fact that they are able to come and support that transition and help us, or help the person who's transitioning through that transition. The soul naturally leaves the body and transitions, but it's more of a making it peaceful, making it easy, making it smoother, making them feel loved and comforted. And I just love the way that they shared that and the way it came in. It was midway into the story, so I wasn't, not that I'm ever expecting what happens next because everyone's story is so unique, but it was a really lovely addition that grandma and her grandson showed up to share. Now, like I said, this kind of transitions us into this next story of a reading that I want to tell you. And it was actually the grown up kiddo who was in my office. It was a gentleman who was there for a reading, and I was aware of his mom in the spirit world. And this mom in the spirit world was first sharing about her life and what a wonderful, special woman she was. She really, I think everyone's special, but some people go above and beyond for other people. She had been a teacher and she had traveled the world, and she was just a really incredible soul in a lot of people's lives here in this world. And unfortunately, in the later part of her life, she had moved into advanced stages of dementia. And there was a time where she just became a bit of a different version of herself. If you've ever experienced someone in advancing Alzheimer's or dementia, or seen it in a movie, or heard about it through someone else, you'll know that sometimes as that illness advances, the person who's experiencing the illness is easily confused. They can sometimes get scared. They can sometimes have very emotional outbursts because they don't always, recognize people, or they might slip in and out of the awareness on this side. And she was articulating all of that, along with letting me know from the spirit world that her son and her other siblings had really researched these care facilities, and they had arranged it so that she could be in this wonderful care facility with a supportive medical staff who really understood what memory care looks like and how to do it in a loving way. There are special facilities that work specifically with people in memory care challenge. So she really loved the staff there. And she was saying that, sometimes her kids weren't able to visit as often as they'd like, just because they had their own kids and busy lives, and that they'd come sometimes, but geographically they weren't all in the same state in the US. So she said that when her son would come and visit, there were times where she wouldn't recognize him, and she knew that it really upset him and made him sad. So one of the things she was wanting to communicate was that she had all of her memories back. And it's part of why she was sharing details about his childhood, and trips they took and things that they did, and who she was when he was a little kiddo, even though he was an older gentleman when I met him in my office. Um, so she wanted him to know that she really did understand who he was, and that even though she couldn't remember him in that memory care facility as that advanced dementia set in for her, her soul knew who he was. And she was also sharing that there's times when not only this son would come visit, but additional family members would come visit, and she would be talking to people that they couldn't see. She would be talking about her husband who had passed to the other side. She was talking about her sister. And my client said, yes, she was doing that. And I didn't understand why. I thought she was just confused. And she said, from the spirit world, she was sharing with me, no, my husband was coming to visit with me while I was making my transition, because that advancing Alzheimer's or dementia, that transition's often long. And sometimes it feels like they're here in this world and have clarity and are kind of awake, if you will. And other times it feels like they slip into more of like a dreamlike state, or an uncertainty. For some, it's just a gazing off, into space, or a gazing off into the wall. Some have conversations, but she was saying, no, I was talking about my husband because he was there visiting with me, and also my sister, and she was sitting right beside me. And he was just shocked that she was bringing this, because he said it was something that was happening for the last like years of her life. This was happening. And he was so set at ease, because he was saying, oh, how beautiful, because he had been concerned during that time. Like I said, they didn't live super close to where she was, and he was worried that she was feeling lonely or sad or alone. And she was saying, no, your dad was here visiting with me when I was transitioning over, and my sister was there sometimes, and they helped me to transition, and I wasn't scared. And actually, then she let me know that some of the family was there at the time of her passing, and got to say very beautiful words to her, even though she wasn't really able to communicate back. She wanted them to know that she did receive all of the emotions, all of the thoughts, all of the words that they were giving her from their heart. And they said she was staring off in kind of like 1,000-yard stare that day. And she kept reaching out, and she was showing me in this reading, and I was explaining to her son, my client, yeah, she shows me that she's reaching for her sister, who we were just talking about, that was visiting her, and that she was reaching for her husband. And actually, she shows me that her parents were there as well. And uh, then once she made her full transition, she was explaining that, once she fully transitioned over, then she was able to She had had a child that had crossed over to the spirit world, so she was able to see him. There had been another child in a different part of the family that had crossed over, so she was saying, and he was there. And she was just really wanting her family to know that not only was she not alone in that memory care facility, because loved ones from the spirit world were sitting with her, which for whatever reason, when people are in advanced Alzheimer's and dementia, it's not totally uncommon for them to be aware of people who are in the spirit world that are spending time with them. So he was just shocked and relieved to know that, oh my gosh, that's what was happening. Because as I was describing it, as she was communicating it, he was saying, yes, that's exactly how it was that day. That's exactly what happened. And so it was her way of validating not only was she okay, but that she was having that assistance and love through her transition, that her husband was there, that her sister was there, and the other family members, her parents, and others. And so, of course, she's spending time with them now that she's in the spirit world, but just wanting him to know that that was real, that they did aid in her transition and that they were there to support her, and that all of the family was there supporting him, my client, and his family, and with some things that they had been going through in their family at the time. So it's so fascinating to me that different spirit communicators communicate these things. I don't believe anyone ever crosses over alone. Even if someone passes away that has no family on this side, we all have family on the other side. And family, like I said, is not always blood. It's friends that we may have crossed paths with. It's teachers that we may have had that we loved. It's anyone who was in our life or had interest in us in a positive and loving way is someone who we'll meet on the other side. So I also believe it's unlimited who we can meet or spend time with or learn from when we're on the other side. I think it's much greater than our understanding all the things that happen over there in heaven. So I hope that this has been helpful, and I hope this has kind of opened your mind either with your own journey, and how you think about the other side, and how we have so much more access to everyone we've ever known and loved, how families are together who maybe were had like a breakdown in the family and didn't speak anymore. They're reunited, and through that life review, which is why I mentioned it, that's how things become deeply understood. That's how they become healed. That's how they can be together. Though, those people who didn't get along, for example, or who had challenges in their relationships, once they're on the other side, they go through that review and come to deep understanding, compassion with self and other, forgiveness, all of the love wrapped in, so they can be with one another, even if they never met on this side, even if they just barely missed each other, so to speak. Like we were talking about with, a grandparent that passes a couple weeks before their grandchild's born, or vice versa. So really, it's a big answer. Who do we meet in heaven? Everyone. Anyone you want to meet, I believe you're able to meet in your time there as well. Like I said, who greets us on the other side, I feel like is probably a little different case by case. Like we've talked about, there was a husband that was spending time with his wife's dad. There was a grandma who showed up in an ambulance to help her grandson transition. There was a woman who was in the later stages of advancing dementia whose husband and sister came. I've had other people tell me their parents helped them transition. A child that they hadn't seen in many years that had crossed over had helped them transition. Grandparents that they hadn't met in this world. Your soul knows them. Your soul recognizes them. So you would recognize them if they showed up to help you transition. I do believe for some people there are angels involved in that transition. And I believe that as we transition from human form and from human mind, sometimes I believe that it's layered in with whatever we would need to experience to help ease and make that transition comfortable. I have had a few people tell me from the spirit world that their pets have been a part of their transition process, which I don't know if you know people that really dearly, dearly love their animals, but I do. So I know that feeling of deeply, deeply loving an animal where maybe that is the soul that would make you the most excited to see them in transition. So I feel like it's really broad and open and limitless. Um, I do feel like I'm not sure that it's like everyone you've ever met that greets you right away as you're making that transition, just because I feel like it's, you know, we step immediately into the other side. I don't believe we go to an in between place or, whatever, just because, like I said, I've had people communicate the very next day or show signs immediately to loved ones here in the physical world. So the transition happens. We're supported through it. We're loved through it. We spend time with our loved ones, known and unknown, whether they're our side of the family or someone else's. We spend time with our pets, our angels, our guides and inspirers, ancestors, whether through family or through our choosing or through our interests, hobbies, loves, professions. Um, that is what I know about who we get to meet and spend time with on the other side. So I hope, even if all of this didn't resonate with you, or even if you are kind of having some challenges accepting certain words like angels or heaven, you could just think of it as the spirit world, the other side, the afterlife, a world within our world, behind the veil. There's a million ways to say the same thing, the spirit world, the other side. Uh, so I am wondering how you feel about this. If you have any loved ones on the other side, have you ever gotten to experience that part when someone is starting to make their transition and they're looking off into that corner, or they're reaching for something that you can't see with your physical senses, or someone who's in an advancing Alzheimer's or dementia or other um, memory challenge, and they're talking about people who we can't see with our physical eyes anymore, or who are already crossed over to the other side? I'm so curious to hear your personal experience. I feel like so many people have some sort of personal experience with this, and sometimes it's through a reading. Like that parent I told you who was so relieved that their son was met by grandma in the ambulance from the spirit world to comfort him, to support him, both on behalf of herself, her child who's losing their own child, and the rest of the family. So let me know your own experience. Let me know what you thought of this topic. I'm trying to do some more spirit world topics. I know you guys are largely interested in that, and we're going to talk about some psychic phenomena coming up soon. We've got some guests coming in the future, even more guests. I've got this really cool lineup of guests to take us all the way to the summer, pretty much. So we'll just keep diving in and unfolding all of what I can share about the spirit world. But I hope this helps to either, I don't know, ease your heart about who perhaps will greet you, or who perhaps greeted your own loved ones during their transition, or the possibility of who they're spending time with, who they've met, who you might want to spend time with or get to meet eventually when you cross over one day. Um, Let me know. Big hugs, lots of love. I hope to see you again very soon inside Spirit Speakeasy.